Good afternoon, everyone. I'd like to call this meeting to order. It's April 23rd, 2018. This is the regular meeting of the Board of Water Supply. First item, we're going to start with our items requiring board action. And by the way, nice to see all of you. Approval of the minutes of the regular meeting held on March 27th, 2018.
Motion to approve.
Okay, moved
Second.
and seconded. Any discussion on this matter? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the minutes are approved. And the next item we have is requesting an action authorizing a public hearing to consider the proposed fiscal year 2018 to 2019 operating and capital improvement program budget. The proposed notice is in your packets. Manager Lau, did you have any comments?
No, thank you. We are planning for a board budget workshop in earlier May, and this is to authorize the public hearing that will be held on May 29th to consider adopting the operating budget and CIP for fiscal year 2019.
Okay, I hope as many of you can make it as possible. Again, the date is May 29th. It's a Tuesday at 2 p.m. And this is for our upcoming budget beginning for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2018 and ending June 30th, 2019. Can I entertain a motion to approve?
So moved.
Okay, moved
Second?
and seconded. Is there any discussion on this matter? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. All right, the notice is approved, or the public hearing is approved.
Can I just ask a question about process? So
Sure.
we're going to have a workshop at the end of May.
Actually, I'm sorry, May 14th, we'll have a budget workshop before the board meeting in end of May.
Yeah. Okay, so 2 dates to mark on your calendars.
And I believe
On the 14th.
our board secretary Leslie's already contacted you about your availability for the 14th,
Okay,
12 o'clock in the afternoon.
okay.
Okay, and then
29th.
the 29th is when we approve it.
Potentially, yes.
And we'll have one more meeting between May and July
Hold on.
if we don't approve it on the 29th.
Yeah, it's important for the board to actually formally adopt the budget for FY19 before the close of the fiscal year, which ends on June 30th.
Right, which is,
June 30th, the end of June, the board meeting end of June would be the last meeting for the current fiscal year.
Great.
okay, thanks.
And May 14th is a public hearing. It is open to the public as
Public
well.
work.
Yes, it'll be noticed also. And the public is welcome to attend.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to move on to the items for information. First item for information is the Board of Water Supply rate study and water systems facilities charge update.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to ask Joe Cooper, our Waterworks Controller, and Mr. David Ebersol to provide the presentation today.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I'm Joe Cooper, the Waterworks Controller. Dave Ebersol is standing here beside me. He will present the second half of the presentation. As we've been discussing in some of our financial planning and rate study updates, this is kind of a continuation of that, focusing on the water systems facility charge. I'd like to tell you a little bit about or bring you up to date on the water systems facility charge, what it is, and why it's important that we talk about it. This is unlike the water rates or the consumption rate, which people see on their monthly bill. This is a one-time charge based on water use capacity. It's generally charged to new developments or when people are remodeling or upgrading, if they're adding existing capacity to their structures, there could be an additional water system facility charge. It does exclude developments that have paid for and installed part of the water system themselves, or a portion of the system, or a portion of the system. So that happens with some of the larger developments. So again, this is a one-time charge. Most people don't see it, but like I said, developers and a few people do see it as a one-time charge. The purpose is to fund growth-related capacity. This is, we actually had to, when new customers come on, we have to add more capacity, be it source or storage or transmission, and so this is to fund that. It's also to recover costs, and we have some excess capacity or existing capacity within our current structure, and that's been paid for by our current ratepayers, and so this is to reimburse current ratepayers for to recover the cost of the existing capacity. These type of charges are common in water facilities or water utilities. These are authorized by our Hawaii Revised Statute, and I want to say they kind of do distinguish exactly what they're supposed to be for, and that they should be substantially related to the needs arising from the development. And finally, that they will be charged precedent to the condition. So this is an issue that's come up before, but basically it's that when they get the permit, before the system is built, before they're authorized to go forward with their construction, they must pay this fee. This is generally what our water system looks like, and this is what is the water system facility fee is supporting. It's supporting all our sources, tunnels, shafts, and wells. We have over 200 of these sources. Treatment facilities, we have 13 treatment facilities, reservoirs and booster pumps to maintain the water pressure and to maintain availability, over 2,100 miles of pipeline, 21,000 fire hydrants, and finally to service 170,000 accounts. As we add new developments, we have a little pop-up, a little house comes up. A small addition doesn't actually cause us to add any capacity. They can buy into the existing capacity, but as we add more and more developments, then we ultimately have to add more storage or treatment of capacity. And that is what this fee is for. Again, it's only for the backbone of our system, which is the source, resource development, the capture and treat that source, transmission, pipelines to carry it to the house or business, and finally daily storage. Why would we update the water facility charge? The last time we updated it was in 1993, about 25 years ago. Water use patterns have changed. Our growth patterns have changed. The capabilities of our existing system have changed. There have been a lot of changes, I guess, to summarize it. Costs have gone up. We've done a technical analysis and updated with both the Water Master Plan and our infrastructure investment plan, what we need and what we expect to need in the next 30 years. And so this gives us an idea of how much we will need to invest. And then it makes sense as we were reviewing our other rates to also concurrently review our water system facility charges. There are 5 basic steps to making this computation. One is to determine the existing capacity that can be bought into. This generally has a lower price and so is advantageous for developers and new customers. We then use, like I said, the Water Master Plan and our 10-year capital projects plan to help identify those growth-related infrastructure projects that we need to support this growth. We estimate the cost that these, both the existing capacity and the new capacity, will cost to develop, and that's actually done per fixture unit. Fixture unit is an archaic term that applies different values to different types of fixtures. And then we calculate the updated cost as a weighted average of those. Then it becomes a policy and an implementation issue where we will bring it back before the board for final discussion. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions at this point, I'll be happy to address those. Then Dave will bring you up to date. We've also presented this to our stakeholder advisory group and to several other community members, and Dave will update you on their input.
Thanks, Joe. So as Joe mentioned, the fifth step in there is to evaluate the policy and implementation issues. And so we've been working with different groups of stakeholders to help evaluate the different implementation issues associated with updating the water system facilities charge. The technical analysis suggests that for some types of customers, particularly large non-residential developments and agricultural customers, that there could be substantial changes in the amount of the water system facilities charge. So we've been working with different groups to, again, identify those potential issues and try and come up with ways to address them as part of the process of framing what ultimately should happen with the water system facilities charge, and then to be able to bring some recommendations to your board for consideration. So there was a meeting held on March 19th with a group of developers, and this summarizes the input from that meeting. Some of the input was regarding what the water system facilities charge for live-work units might look like. These are units that can be for either use, for either a business use or as a residence, and those types of water use vary quite drastically from each other, and so that issue was raised. A creative suggestion from the meeting was if a developer could go to a nearby building that they didn't own, replace its high-flow plumbing fixtures with new low-flow fixtures, and receive a credit towards the water system facilities charge, kind of like is done in some jurisdictions with air pollution credits or that type of a thing. So, and then I think overall the feel of that developers meeting was an expression of appreciation for seeing the methodology that was shown. The group seemed to understand it and appreciate the effort that had gone into it, and viewed that as a positive development on the part of the Board of Water Supply to do such a detailed analysis and then be willing to talk about implementation issues that might be associated with it. Two different meetings with agricultural stakeholders were held, one on April 6th and one on April 9th. And like the developers, the attendees certainly understood the water system facilities charge, but they were, quite frankly, surprised at the amount of change in that charge that could result. And so some suggestions that were raised is possibly looking at legislative solutions, with the idea that the state might be able to provide funding for the Board of Water Supply to offset costs specifically related to the agricultural charge. The manager expressed a willingness to join meeting attendees in advocating for the state to take a more active role in supporting agriculture. And there was also a suggestion that in addition to just talking about the water system facilities charge, the conversation should include other agricultural cost issues, like the Food Safety Modernization Act, issues associated with important agricultural lands, various incentives, recognizing that the agricultural community isn't just under financial pressure on one front, but on multiple fronts simultaneously. There was a suggestion to consider opportunities to reallocate a portion of the barrel tax receipts to better support agriculture, or perhaps consideration of a new food tax. There was recognition that education to farmers about agricultural water conservation is a need within the agricultural community, and opportunities for that should be considered. There was recognition that the cost of BWS subsidies, if they are to be given, are borne by all of the other customers of the BWS. And they were, like the developers, pleased that the board had reached out to schedule meetings, provide information, and facilitate this important conversation. We also presented the same information to the Stakeholder Advisory Group on April 11th. And some comments from that is one person said or recognized that the state as a whole is trying to encourage more people to go into agriculture, and especially on Oahu. And especially with younger farmers, these costs are going to be a big turnoff. They're prohibitive. Recognition, similar to the other meetings, that farmers are under tremendous financial pressure from multiple fronts, so that anything the board can do to help would be important. With these potentially looming increases, perhaps it creates a sense of urgency to bring the right players to the table to discuss the challenges facing agriculture. And then the observation that this really needs to be thought through very carefully before it's finalized. Certainly the stakeholders didn't want anyone saying that the Board of Water Supply doesn't support agriculture. With that, looking at next steps, the next steps with regard to the water system facilities charge are to continue conversations with these various stakeholder groups, especially agriculture, to consider various alternatives to minimize the impacts of changes. And then to also, if you'll recall, back in January at the board workshop that we did, we talked about guardrails for water rates. Things like maintaining the subsidy and rates for agriculture, and not making certain changes to affordability programs, and looking for increasing cost of service recovery. All those types of guardrails were things that we talked about back in January with regard to water rates. So it might be appropriate to consider some similar guardrails with regard to the water system facilities charge, perhaps making sure that that is moving closer to the actual cost associated with providing this capacity, seeing if there might be opportunities to encourage conservation within this one-time charge, the concept of avoiding rate shock or making changes gradually, and then also the issue of whether or not there should be some type of a subsidy for agriculture or others. With that, happy to answer any questions.
What's the timeline on this? On this, the next step I know is to continue conversations, but are we hoping to adopt, make the changes this year?
Yeah, I think our target is to sometime this year, later this year, to come before the board with like a draft proposal. Perhaps we might come before the board to establish some guardrails first, like we did for water rates, which is the usage rates. This is the impact fees. And then come up with a draft proposal, more discussions with different stakeholders, especially like the agriculture community and the developers. And then place the draft before the board. If the board is comfortable with the draft, to seek public input, then we might go more broadly for public input and possible adoption by the board before the end of the year.
Okay, so at that time we'll have all the information, all the draft will have the numbers, we'll plug in the numbers and see what the effects are.
Yeah, the most challenging one is the agricultural customers, because looking at the actual water usage capacity impacts of, that farmers have on our water system, a bit more significant than earlier estimated when the charges were developed back in '93.
Okay. So the last time we, or the last time the board adjusted these charges was
in the 90s.
25 years ago.
Yeah, around 25 years ago. What gives us the opportunity to do it today is that we've completed the Water Master Plan, the Infrastructure Investment Plan, or the 30-year capital program, and our long-term financial plan. So those provide a sound basis for calculation of these charges. Then it becomes a policy decision of the board, how the board wants to proceed at that point. Technically, we tell you what the cost of the capacities are based on our long-term plans. And then how to implement will be a board decision if the board wants to move forward with this.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. I'd like to also remind the board, any other questions on the water system facilities charges?
Members?
We are still looking at incentives, which is waiver of charges for affordable housing, homelessness, and fire sprinkler retrofits. And that'll be a decision the board will have to make with the current rate proposal at some point.
And those have to do with the water system facility charge.
Yeah, they do. So the numbers that we present to you, if it does involve the water system facilities charge or some kind of connection or hookup fee, would be based on the existing numbers, 93 rates basically. But we could kind of give you an idea what the future rates might be like with an update that could happen in the near future.
I think those subsidies, we've already approved back in January,
Yeah, and the guardrails,
so
you
it's
set
just a matter of setting the numbers now.
the numbers, the amounts. And different approaches, you could even consider a annual allocation with once that is used up, and then they'd have to wait till the next year's allocation. So sort of like, that way would be much easier in terms of budgeting. Then we know what the revenue impacts, as opposed to an open-ended program that if you have 5,000 affordable units happening in 1 year, then that could have a significant negative impact on our revenue to operate. Thank you. I'd just like to remind the board that we are holding our first public hearing this week on Thursday, April 26th at Mission Memorial Auditorium, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. Also on May 14th at Kapolei Hale, same time. Also on May 15th at Benjamin Parker Elementary School Cafeteria, and May 24th at Mililani Rec Center number 5. All from 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. It's open to the public. We are putting out a official notice of the meeting, so we welcome as many, and it will be for information only for the board. Welcome the board's attendance. I know the chair has actually volunteered to be there at all of these meetings, which is very commendable.
What was the time again, Ernie?
6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m.
Thank you.
April 26th, May 14th, May 15th, and May 24th.
Yeah, I think it's important for transparency purposes and communication purposes to try to reach as many people as we can, and yeah, we definitely want to show our commitment to that, and these hearings, I think, exemplify that. So thank you for setting it up.
I appreciate it. Just so the board's information, we've done outreach with the Star Advertiser. Had a meeting with the editorial board, so hopefully in the near future there'll be an editorial about this. They've had a few editorial. We will be submitting an op-ed to the Star Advertiser. We've done a number of radio interviews, Hawaii Public Radio, KSSK, and Rick Hamada show just this morning. And we have, I think, around a dozen neighborhood board meetings set up in the next couple months to provide a short presentation about the rate proposal to them. So extensive outreach also to the Honolulu Board of Realtors and others.
Yeah, and really, I think there was something in the newspaper. I think it was last night or today. So I did see that, and yeah, I think it's important that the public also understand the reasoning behind this. Is really our number one priority is to get those water mains updated and go up to 21 miles annually to meet the AWWA recommendations.
Right, the additional revenues needed to increase the investment into our water system infrastructure and to ramp up, like you say, to 21 miles of pipeline being replaced a year in about 10 years from now. Thank you.
Just one question is to the consultant. The facilities charge is one time
Yes,
versus established no hookup.
it's a one-time charge.
So how many new farmers are we getting every year? How many new hookups are we getting?
Yeah, we've been working with Ellen and other staff to go through and analyze the data, and as near as we can tell, it's about 10 new accounts per year.
10 accounts per year. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Members, any more questions on this item? Okay, hearing none, I'm gonna move on to the next item. Item number 2, financial update for the quarter ended March 31st, 2018. Chair recognizes Joe Cooper.
Thank you, Chair Andaya. I'm here to give the quarterly financial report for the period from July 1st till March 31st of this year. We had our revenues for the 9-month period was $182 million. That's about $5 million, or about $5 million over our budgeted revenue. As we get into some of the later slides, we'll see that most of that comes from revenue that we received back in August and September during our hot, dry months. Our operating costs were $127 million, which is about $21 million over our budgeted cost, but is pretty much in line with prior year costs. And that gives us an actual net revenue of $55 million, which is about $26 million over our budgeted net revenues. If we look at a little more detail into some of our costs, we see that personnel costs were $29 million, about $6 million under our budget. That's mostly due to vacancies as we budget for full employment. Services and supplies is about $11 million under budget. Miscellaneous repairs and maintenance is $2 million under budget. Equipment is at $2 million expended, is $3 million under budget, which is really pretty close to what we've, to our budget. In past years, we've actually been at under $1 million in actual expenses for equipment, so we've stepped up the purchases there. Utilities and debt service are pretty close to on budget at only $1 million under budget. Whoa. Well, I don't know what happened to the rest of this slide. I can fill it in. I think in your presentation package you have a slide that has more of the detail on it. This area here is actually our fixed cost, which is about $38 million, and that's our largest area of costs. At about 29% of our cost. The next largest area is services, supplies, and material at $33 million, or 26% of our cost. Personnel services is up here. That's at about $29 million, or 23% of our cost. And finally, debt service down in this corner is about $25 million. This graph breaks it down, those costs as compared to budget, as opposed to percentage of total costs. Again, we have personnel services. The variance is due to vacancies. Materials and supplies has the largest difference of about $13 million under budget. And the other areas are really just running close to budget, just slightly under budget. This breaks it down by month, our total operating expenditures by month. And you can see that The yellow line is the budgeted expenses, so our expenses went up somewhat in September and October, or actually, no, went down in September and October, I'm sorry. They were budgeted higher. Usually that's a lag from, it takes us a while from at the beginning of the year to get our expenditures ramped up. And then this past month in August, our actuals expenditures exceeded our budget. That actually is contributed largely to some electronic security purchases that were made, and also about $2 million in cars and trucks that were purchased last month. This is our revenue forecast, or our revenue year-to-date, quarter-to-date. And as I mentioned earlier, we are about $5 million over budget. That's about just under 3% for the year. Most of that comes back here in August and September, when our revenues exceeded our budgeted revenues by quite a bit due to the warm weather we had during that period of time. Currently, actually, our revenue for the last 3 months for this quarter has been somewhat below budget, probably due to the amount of rain we've had. And that concludes my presentation for the quarter. Are there any questions or comments? Yes.
Joe, I have a question. So, in comparing the budgeted amount and the actual expenditures,
Yes.
I'm looking at the fixed charges, which is the only category showing where we spent more than the budgeted amount. And it's a very small variation, so it's not a big deal. But I just was wondering, and I looked at most of it can be attributed to retirement system contribution.
Well, fixed charges, yes, is utility fees, case fees, and retirement and post-employment benefits. So yes, most of that variance is due to retirement benefits. And in one of the things, and it's always a struggle, is that I'm trying to remember exactly what the term we use. When people retire, often the calculation is not precise, and then usually about a year later, we get a bill from ERS saying, oh, to make up for these retirement contributions for people that have recently retired, please remit to us, and it's usually several $100,000. And that's to make up for contributions that as people retire, whether they're paid for out of their the lapsed vacation, but usually there's a reconciliation that we have to do after that happens, and we usually get a bill for that, which is hard to budget for. We can budget for our general amounts on our general expected requirements, contributions.
And does that figure, I mean, I know you said it's a reconciliation. Does that figure vary by the number of retirees the previous year? So if you have a greater number than you...
Yes, it varies by the number of retirees the previous year. And not just the number of retirees, but the specific retirees and how much their benefits have been calculated.
But we're current on any obligation?
We're current on all our obligations, and the post-retirement, the health benefit, we're actually somewhat ahead of most of the other departments because of the type of account it is. With the ERS, the retirement benefits being a pooled agency account, we contribute exactly the amount that we're required to contribute.
I think some of the challenges too, I believe ERS increased the amount required to contribute.
Well, yes, there have been several GASB pronouncements that have changed the amounts and the calculations of how post-retirement benefits are handled, and so those are allowing us to catch up. Actually, that's kind of and which is kind of beneficial to us too. It gives us some more clear-cut guidelines as to doing that, and it's also put us on a path to meet all our future obligations, to estimate and meet all our future obligations in a rational manner. And so, I can commend the ERS. I think they have made good strides in the last couple of years in addressing these challenges.
Okay, members, any?
Any other
questions?
questions? Okay, thank you very
All
much.
right, thank you for the report. All right, next item for information, item number 3, status update of groundwater levels at all index stations.
I'd
Chair
like to-
recognizes Barry Usagawa.
Head of our Water Resources Division.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. The report for this month is status quo, no significant changes. Groundwater levels are high, pumpage is low. In fact, the lowest production averages that I recall are in the 120s, 125. So 129 is about as low as it gets in the winter months. And the forecast for rainfall is still through June. So expect above normal rainfall for the next couple of months. And if there's any more questions, let me know.
Members, any questions? All right, thank you. Yeah, our last item for information today is the water main repair report for March 2018. Chair recognizes Mr. Mike Fuki.
Good afternoon, Chair Andaya, members of the board. Maybe because we didn't pump so much, the main breaks for March is at the level of 20. Knock on wood, stays down that low. One of the main breaks I want to kind of bring up is the one that happened on March 1st on Mokohano Street, the 36-inch main concrete cylinder pipe.
Whoa.
That's a sample.
And this is the sample what came out. Understand, pipe is like this. It's got blown up. If you take a look at it, that's the shape it's in. Currently, capital projects have a relining project to hopefully reinforce this pipe, but this is what came out. Okay, so,
How old was that?
I'm sorry?
How old was that?
It wasn't that old. It was back in the 60s. It's not that old. It's not like the one that happened on Dole Street, which was 90 years old.
1928 installation.
So,
Mike, is
yeah,
this
it's
in-
age.
This is inside the tunnel.
This is inside a tunnel,
Kamehame
tunnel.
Under Kamehame
Yeah,
Ridge.
it links Kalama Valley with Hawaii Kai. So this is what we had to deal with. You can see this, how thin it is,
Jeez.
really corroded.
It's encasing concrete.
Yep. Okay.
That'll be a good pipe for the public hearing.
Yeah, that's a great visual.
I think Ernie going to tell me to bring it to the to the meeting next week. Okay. That's all I got. Any questions?
Members?
Yeah,
Yep,
thank you.
Thank you for the report.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
All right, that takes us to the end of our regular agenda. Can I get a motion to move into executive session?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.